What is going on, you guys? Today I have another super quick episode for you. So we're going to be reviewing a YouTuber named Nomad Capitalist, and the episode title is The Cheapest Countries in the World for Expats. Let's get into it.
The numbers are in. The most affordable places to live as an expat. We're going to cover the top 10, and I'm going to tell you which are actually accessible to entrepreneurs and investors. We do help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors here at Nomad Capitalist. One of the challenges of these cheapest places to live, best places for expats list are often that a lot of expats are employees. They get moved there by a company, and if you don't have a company to move you there, that country may be tougher to go to. Qatar is one example that you see on some studies. It is not as easy to go to Qatar as an entrepreneur or an investor, but very easy if you get a job working with Qatar Airways, for example. And so if you are someone who is running your own show, where do you go? So here's the headline. Vietnam is the cheapest place, the most affordable country for expats in 2024. We're going to cover that in a moment and go through the entire top 10. Even if you are a multimillionaire, I'll tell you, I mean, there's something nice about not only seeing the world transpire right before your very eyes in some of these emerging countries, like in Southeast Asia, where Vietnam is, but hey, why not put more money back into your business? Why not put more money back into your portfolio? Why not live more of the high life at a lower price by going to a more affordable place? We see a lot of Western clients who are saying, I can afford the prices in my Western legacy brand country, but why am I paying them when I can get better service at the restaurant? I can get massages in my home. I just get more service. If you go to places like Latin America, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, people have live-in maids. They have drivers. They have things that are luxurious because those countries are more affordable. So this is a report from the Expat Insider 2024 in conjunction with Internations. They talked to 12,000 different expats from pretty much every country on Earth, and they compiled a report which talked about the most affordable countries in the world. Number one was Vietnam. Now, Vietnam is opening up. It's becoming a bit easier to invest there. I think a lot of the more digital nomad types who go to Vietnam are using visas, and they're just cycling in and out of different visas. Not as many options yet in Vietnam to live there. I was in Vietnam about a year ago. I think it's a fascinating place. I think Hanoi is actually more interesting despite being less of a business hub than Ho Chi Minh City. But very interesting country. It's a place that I invest in from afar, but a little bit harder to get into. Number two, a country we've talked.
And of course, I guess something worth mentioning, obviously, right, is not everyone's going to be like living a luxury lifestyle because they moved to one of these places, like getting like a live-in maid or like a driver. Like you don't necessarily need those things. There's a lot of digital nomads and remote workers that I know that don't do any of that. They live like a pretty chill life. One interesting thing about Vietnam is it's really close. Like Southeast Asia, for one, right? Like it's easy to fly between the countries there, and it's usually cheaper than flights, like let's say across the U.S., right? It kind of varies a little bit, but they're about as close together as like going a few states over or across the country, right? So it's quicker to bounce countries there, and it's also usually a little bit cheaper. One thing about Vietnam is I've noticed people saying like every once in a while they have trouble with like their visa, or like it's like an electronic visa photo. So you have to submit an application to enter before you go, which is different than places, I believe. Someone in the comments maybe correct me. I don't think Philippines has that, and I don't think Thailand has that, right? Like you don't need to fill out something before you go. Some of them have like a visa on arrival where maybe you'll like fill out something there, or maybe do like a small little payment there, but it's not expensive. And that's just worth noting, right? Because I've seen people like they do something where like the photo quality is off, and they get denied entry from Vietnam. Like imagine flying all the way from the U.S. to Vietnam and then getting turned around. So just keep that in mind.
About a lot. We have our own Live Like a King video in.
But it's worth mentioning, I've heard, I haven't been yet, Vietnam is beautiful, and a lot of people seem to really like it. So it seems definitely worth going.
Bogota, Colombia, number two most affordable country. It is becoming more expensive. The world is becoming more expensive, and yet very low base to start from in Colombia. If you look at some of the cheapest cities to live in, cheapest cities for real estate, Bogota is pretty affordable. But then you looked at Medellin and Cali; those are going to be really affordable. And so those secondary cities, Medellin, obviously very well frequented by kind of digital nomad types. Cali, not so much. The coast, not so much. Those are some of the best value places. And you can get a residence permit in Colombia, depending on how much time you actually want to spend living there. There are still permits for real estate investors that are relatively affordable. If you want to buy your own home, you can get in. There's other ways to immigrate to Colombia. That's common in Latin America. It's easier to immigrate to Latin American countries at a lower price than Asian countries. So that remains an option. Here's the other concern, though. It may be affordable, but Colombia does have relatively high taxes. It's some of the lowest taxes in the OECD. That's the Western countries' high tax lobbying group. So they're pretty low among their peers. But compared to most of the tax-friendly countries we talk about, it is a bit more of a pain and it's a lot more expensive. So if you start to earn more money, living full-time in Colombia might not be as affordable for you, because if you're going to be moving overseas, you might as well at least reduce the amount of tax that you're paying, because we've seen that there's no correlation between how safe you are or the services you get in that country and the taxes that you pay. Number 3 on the list is Indonesia. They do have more immigration options.
Yeah, and Colombia is beautiful. Like all those places he mentioned are beautiful spots. Medellin's probably the most popular with the digital nomad types. Cali is like it's the salsa capital, right? And so that's a cool place to check out, as well as the capital, Bogota, like all really interesting spots. And of course, personally, I never had any issues when I was there, right? I know people like to talk about like the safety level, but all the people there were very kind, right? I was not like putting myself in funny situations, like places you shouldn't be going, or like staying out necessarily too late, or walking around. And some guys, they have talked about there's a drug that they spike drinks with called scopolamine, and basically it's like what happens is let's say you go to a bar with a girl, or someone offers you a drink, right? Or you leave your water open, maybe, right? Like basically never leave your drink unattended. I never had any issues, but I also don't drink, right? And I also never left my drinks unattended. But basically, they'll like pop the drug into your drink while you're not looking, and you don't even realize it is happening, but you become like a compliant zombie. And by that I mean, like, what happens to a lot of these guys is they go on a date, or they meet a cute girl, and potentially that happens, and they wake up with like all their belongings gone from their apartment, right? Or they will wake up and even like their work laptop's gone, like literally like everything's gone from their apartment. Or they notice, like, you wouldn't even remember this, right? But like a girl, for example, could basically ask you to take her to your ATM, put in your PIN and withdraw all the money from it. Like take your Apple ID, your credit card information, etc. And obviously you'll be put in a rough position, because you'll be out finances. And you almost wouldn't believe that would happen, but that's what the drug does. It's like turns off a part of your brain. So basically you say yes, like, oh, of course, like you kind of like follow orders, like, oh yeah, I'll take out money for you. Like, I'll put my PIN in here, right? So keep that in mind. I don't want to say any of that to scare you, right? Because like it was easy to stay safe there. You just have to be smart, right? Like just not do things that you shouldn't be doing, right? Or like just kind of staying out of trouble. Don't be a degenerate, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the best I can tell you. Like, a lot of my friends and myself were all very safe there in other parts of Latin America as well. So just I thought that was worth mentioning to you guys.
Now, such as the My Second Home program there, where you make a reasonable 6-figure investment. There are plenty of other ways to move there. Now, Indonesia has talked about being more tax favorable. People who have certain residence permits do need to be aware of taxation in Indonesia. It is not as friendly as some of the other Southeast Asian countries. And I think a lot of people, again, the kind of digital nomads living in Bali, are just saying, hey, they're not going to get me. I am the goody two-shoes of the offshore business. We encourage you to follow all the laws. There's plenty of places to go if you want to pay zero or low taxes. Indonesia is not one of them. So keep in mind, in these more emerging countries, you can actually, there's more favorable tax laws in terms of there's not as many ways for them to get you into the tax net. So you could theoretically spend, 1/3 of your year in Colombia, 1/3 of your year in Indonesia, 1/3 of your year somewhere else. Basically my trifecta method, as I've called it for years, and you may be in a good tax situation, more so than you would be if you did that in 3 different Western countries. But if you spend full time in Colombia or Indonesia, it's not going to be as affordable because you should be sucked into the tax net. And just thinking they're not going to get you isn't the approach that I would take. Number 4, tax-friendly Panama is.
And it's worth mentioning too, like Bali or Indonesia just in general is very beautiful, right? I mean, Bali's probably like the most like Instagram-y, like tourist trap kind of place. Again, though, it's beautiful. I mean, it's similar to some of the other Southeast Asian places, right? Like the bikes are crazy. Like sometimes the traffic can be wild. Depending on what you want, sometimes you might feel like man, like there's too many foreigners around. Like you want to be like in somewhere like with less foreigners, basically. But still a beautiful place. One complaint I've heard, I haven't really dealt with this myself, is that like for certain like tourist things, like to check out like waterfalls or stuff like that, like a natural attraction, they start charging for like a lot of different things, rather than it just being like something where you can go and check it out, right? In other countries, like they don't always charge you to go to like all these different things just found in nature. So I never really dealt with that myself. So that's more like internet hearsay, right? I just thought it was worth mentioning because again, like if you go to Bali or another part of Indonesia, it's still like a beautiful country, and I highly recommend it.
It's one of the most affordable places. Now, Panama uses the dollar, and so even when I first went to Panama a decade or so ago, I found it to be much more expensive than other places. Colombia to me is cheaper in part. They have their own currency. The currency, while it's been relatively stable in recent months, it historically has gone down and down and down versus the dollar, the euro, etc. Panama doesn't have that issue, and so you're not benefiting from a weaker currency. Panama, I would not think, was actually as high ranked as it was in terms of being affordable. But number 4 on the list, tax friendly. And so if you structure yourself properly, you could live there year round and have a very good tax situation. Same tax situation in the number 5 country, in the Philippines. They've rolled out some new residence programs recently. This is one of the more affordable countries in Asia to get a residence. You can get in for $75,000 under a couple of different programs. That's an investment in the Philippines. There's other ways you can get in as well, but for someone who just wants to put some money aside and live there. Tax-friendly country, one of the few countries in Asia where you can work your way towards citizenship. There's a couple of reasons why it may not be advisable. But the Philippines is affordable. You're seeing as some of the Asian currencies have strengthened against the dollar recently. It's become a bit more expensive, but their currency has not been the best performer over the years as well. Number 6, India, to live.
So Philippines, I think, and again, like someone correct me in the comments, I think the Philippines is another one where you don't need, like Vietnam, you need the application to fill out beforehand before you go, or you might get denied entry. But I'm pretty sure Philippines might fall into the category of like you can arrive and you can fill out some forms there and maybe pay like a small like entry fee, and then you're good to go. Someone who knows, maybe comment down below. I don't want to be talking out of my butt. I want to admit that I don't know here, so don't hold my word on that one. But a lot of people seem to really love the Philippines. Whether you want to go in the province, the countryside, or somewhere close to the beaches or the city, lots to check out there, lots for everybody. And one thing worth mentioning, I noticed, I was watching a video by some guy the other day, like he was saying like he didn't want to cover it, but he has a Filipino wife and knows a lot of expats over there, right? And like a lot of guys apparently on the internet are asking like, I heard that if you get like a Filipina girlfriend or wife, that like her whole family is going to expect me to take care of them, like pay for all their stuff. And he polled a lot of the guys who were like messaging him online, and also a lot of guys he knew in person in the Philippines with like Filipina girlfriends or wives, and they were all kind of laughing about it. They're like, no, they don't expect that. And I help out when I can, of course, but like, I'm not like expected to give to them, right? It's just when I want to, out of kindness, for like maybe special occasions or just to help out, but it's not expected. And he said also some of them, the rare cases where it did happen, he noticed some of the family was like stopping working because they were receiving the money, and they were like expecting it then, right? So he basically, those guys were weaning them off and making sure not to help them as much because of that situation, right? Like they're kind of taking away their drive to work harder, right? So they would get like lazy, and like they're like the Netflix or like the lifestyle, like the bills would increase, but they stopped working. So like it's, let's be real, right? Like this is a side note, like a little bit of a tangent on this video, but that would happen anywhere, right? Like even if you were in your home country, like for me it would be the US. Like I want to help people out of the kindness of my heart when I can, but I don't want people to expect things from me, right? Like I think that's not right. And it's like oh, like you're not going to pay my bills again, right? It's like that's a little bit ridiculous. So it doesn't matter where you go, right? But basically the guy I was watching dispelled that rumor about the Philippines because a lot of the guys he knew there were not being expected to pay for everything for their entire family, right? Which is kind of a funny concept.
Well, in India, it's more expensive than you might think. This is a misconception people have about these very emerging countries like India or certain African countries is, how it must be super, super duper cheap. And yes, if you look at some of the smaller Indian cities, they are some of the cheapest places in the world. Actually, Pakistan next door, I think, has the cheapest cities in the world. But if you want to live a good expat life in India, it may cost more than other places because there's such a different levels of life. Number 7, Mexico. The currency is weaker against the US dollar since the presidential election there. I stocked up on some stuff in Mexico when that happened and have been reading some articles recently on why did Mexico get beaten up so badly. This is a buying opportunity. A lot of Americans have moved to Mexico. Places like Mexico City have become more expensive. San Miguel de Allende, Cabo, a lot of people have gone there. Playa del Carmen, Tulum, obviously, very developed cities in that country, very affordable. It's a place where you can get citizenship, and a very good citizenship at that. So out of all these places, Colombia, you could get citizenship, but it would be most likely less tax-friendly. Mexico has a very unique tax program where you could be able to live there a good chunk of the year, have a very tax-friendly situation, and work towards naturalization. Now, once you're a citizen, the taxes could change, but great lifestyle, great food, great time zone if you're used to working with North America. Mexico, the number 7th country on the list. Thailand comes in at number.
And I know a lot of people that live in Mexico. I mean, being from the U.S., it's the easiest to get to first. So it's almost like your starter country, right? But a lot of people stay there because they really love it, right? I mean, of course, like the weather's great, the food's great. There's a lot of Americans or Canadians there, right? So it's still a good spot. And funny enough, I mean, you kind of get like, regardless, it's a good spot. For me, like I noticed, like it was maybe just for example, like this is a little bit like a guess here, but it was like half of the prices you would pay in the U.S., right? But then you start to go to like Colombia, and that's like 1/4 the price, right? Just for example. So like for me, it was kind of like, okay, well, like Mexico's cool, and like it's in a better situation now because it's half the price. But like some of these other places where you can live a great life and stretch the dollar even more, right? Like Colombia or somewhere else, like that just made more sense at the time. But that being said, like a lot of Americans and Canadians, I'm sure other expats as well, love Mexico, like Mexico City, like the Cancun area, some of those other places he mentioned. So definitely still worth checking out.
8, their currency got banged up a little bit over the last couple of years. It's strengthening a bit more now. Asia is a place where they want you to invest money in general to live there. They do have some of these, shorter term visas, but if you want longevity in a place like Thailand, you're going to be investing a couple $100,000. But putting some money in the bank, I think their banks are relatively well run. That is number 8. And you've got Bangkok, which is, I think real estate is kind of topped out there. I think real estate in a number of places in Thailand is topped out. I'm not sure that's so affordable, quite frankly, compared to Kuala Lumpur. Real estate's going to be a lot cheaper there. So if you're buying property, I don't think Thailand is the most affordable place, or one of them in Asia. But for just day-to-day life, they ranked at number 8 in the world. Number 9, Brazil.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Kuala Lumpur. I was only there for like a day, basically. Like I spent a little bit of time outside of the airport, checking out some food and stuff. Seems also like a good place to move, check out as a digital nomad. They seem pretty friendly there. A lot of them actually speak really good English, which is convenient. And then Thailand, yeah, I mean, it depends on what level you're at, because he's talking about like people like straight up like buying a house or apartment there, like flat out buying it. A lot of people maybe aren't in that position to do that just yet, so they want to save up and stretch their dollar. So like, there's a lot of places in Thailand where you're going to get a better deal than your home country anyways. So it's a beautiful place. Food's great. People are friendly, right? So, I recommend it. It's another good spot to check out amongst the list.
Same issue with the currency, same issue with the tax problems. If you live there, it's going to be a tax issue. But it's a place where you can get citizenship, including in let's call it 2 years all in. If you have a child there, if you give birth there, or if you marry a Brazilian. So that's one of the most favorable countries.
Oh, by the way, in Thailand is one where they keep sort of changing. Like there's like a visa on arrival, so it's not like you don't have to fill out a form beforehand, but they keep changing like the amount of days that you can stay. There's different types of visas you can get, right, to stay longer. Like they're working on a digital nomad visa. I think it's out already. There's some kind of like elite Thai visa, but I don't really think that makes sense unless you're a retiree. And even then, the digital nomad visa, I think, is like a better bang for your buck there. Um, Someone maybe can correct me in the comments there, because it might make more sense to get the elite visa or like a retiree visa if you're in that position. But the visa on arrival thing for Thailand, like, when I got there the first time, it was like they gave you 30 days on arrival, and then you could extend it for another 30 days. I've heard people say that they got 45 days, and then they could extend it for 30. I came back after Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, and they made it 60 days on arrival, and then you could add on 30 days to that, right? So, as long as you're not like, because the one thing about that is there's some guys that are doing that like way too consistently, right? And so like when they go through immigration in like the airport or like they do like a land border run or something, right? Like maybe they do it like way too consistently. So like every once in a while, like the immigration officers potentially could stop you, right? Like what are you doing? Like they kind of like feel like you're trying to live there rather than visiting or being more of a tourist. So you might get questioned there, especially if you're in like there's like the student visa where you could learn Thai or Muay Thai. Like they might test you on your Thai language abilities. So keep some of these things in mind, but still it's a great country to check out.
For citizenship, it's a pretty cheap place. Safety in some areas is not as good. A lot of people go to the south, like Florianopolis, that's a bit better there. China came in at number 10. That's pretty much people who are.
I don't know much about Brazil. I have heard Florianopolis is a nicer, I guess potentially like nicer and safer spot to go, especially as a foreigner, right? And I'm not sure exactly about this, so I want to say that first. But I think Brazil is also a pretty decent bet in terms of like, I think it's like you would pay like 1/4 or even like 1/5 of the prices you'd be paying in the U.S., right? So obviously like that sounds pretty appealing. So a lot of people seem to love that place. Again, like it's similar to Colombia, right? Like people like to talk about like the safety issues there. So you don't want to be walking in the wrong places, keeping your wits about you, not leaving your drink unattended, because Brazil has a similar, some similar horror stories to Colombia about that one. But again, like both places have a ton of like really warm and friendly people, beautiful places to check out. So, I'm encouraging you not to live your life in fear, and also to be open to these experiences, right? Because they're great places.
Working at companies.
Just keep your wits about you, like you don't have to be like like super guarded, but just like make smart decisions. Don't be degenerate, and do things you shouldn't be doing, right? Like there's a quote that I like. It's like nothing good happens after 10 p.m. right? And of course I've been out after 10 p.m. in those places, but you know what I'm saying.
Rather than entrepreneurs and investors going to China. I was surprised not to see Malaysia on the list. We do talk about Malaysia a lot. Nomad Capitalist Live, our annual event, is in Malaysia, and one of the reasons why we have it there is Malaysia is very affordable. Now the currency has done very well in recent weeks against the dollar. It was at like 28-year lows, and it really surged. And so I'm glad we paid some of our expenses for Nomad Capitalist Live when the currency was a lot weaker. We converted in because we were able to get bank accounts that allowed us to hold Malaysian ringgit, because that's what we do here. We diversify ourselves, and we have bank accounts and companies and all that stuff all around the world. I think Malaysia is one of the more affordable places. Real estate is some of the cheapest per square foot, per square meter in Southeast Asia. And so for me, if I'm going to stay somewhere long term, I can get long term.
By the way, look at that, because if you've ever watched a video on Thailand condos, right, it looks very similar to that, right? So like the infinity pool, probably like the condo with the apartment, and like there's already a gym in the apartment, right? So like instead of paying for an external gym or an external pool, et cetera, right? Like I think from what it looks like, and when I was in Kuala Lumpur for a day, I'm sure there's other good spots to check out in Malaysia as well. But when I was in Kuala Lumpur, it seemed like very convenient too. So like similar in the sense of like a Thailand city, like the quality.
Residence permits in Thailand, which is a bit less tax friendly, but still manageable versus what it used to be. Malaysia is still tax friendly. Even if they change that in the next few years, I think it'll still be manageable. Out of all the places in Southeast Asia, Malaysia has some of the cheapest property. And if you're going to stay there long term, I think you want to own a property. It's a form of asset protection. It's a form of asset diversification. And if you were to buy stuff, when the currency was at that 28-year low, you've got a nice little paper profit on that right now. But that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because you don't just want the most affordable place. You want to lock in places, like at Malaysia, or some folks would say like at Thailand, friendly people, low cost of living, government kind of leaves you alone. You want to lock that in. And I think renting long-term is not the best reason. You can make up your own mind on that, for sure. But I think that Malaysia should be on here. One place that also I think should be on here that a lot of people are asking us about recently is Argentina. It is quite affordable, both for living, for hiring people, for a whole lot of stuff, especially if you're bringing money in dollars, for example. So those are two I'm kind of surprised aren't there. The considerations for where to go. Can I move there? Right.
I've heard similar things about Argentina. I've had some few friends check it out. I think it might also be like 1/5 or even like 1/6 as expensive as the US, right? So like 1/6 the price or 1/5 the price, which is really, really good, right? So I don't know too much about the country. I know it's beautiful, food's good, and something funny I've heard about it is that they like wake up a lot later, right? Like everybody wakes up a lot later. Like dinner is a lot later. If you're into nightlife at all, right? Like everything starts a lot later. So like if you're going out in the morning, like one frustration I've heard from foreigners is like, because they're used to being awake and getting stuff done earlier, like working in a coffee shop or whatever, and it's like they walk outside and it's like everything's still closed and it's like 11 a.m. or something, right? So just keep that in mind. It almost sounds like in the U.S. when it's like someone would call it like an old person shop, right? Like or old person downtown, but like they open late, they close early, right? Like kind of like when they feel like it. I'm not too sure, right? I'm not the expert on this, but either way, like it seems like a place worth checking out for sure because it's another beautiful country.
You can go to Vietnam as a tourist. You can go there. Some of these countries have digital nomad visas, but for longevity, if you decide you like it. Can I get a residence permit? So Colombia, Indonesia, Panama, Philippines, Mexico, Thailand, Brazil, easier for that. Is it tax friendly? Right? The biggest expense most people have in their life is taxes, especially in the West. That takes a big chunk. So, a Panama, a Philippines, maybe a Mexico if structured properly, to some extent Thailand, Malaysia, which I mentioned. Those are going to be more tax friendly. Safety, people look at. Some of these countries are more safe than others. Middle East and Asia tend to be safer. So, affordability is good. What am I getting for my money? Am I getting a passport? Latin American countries are more likely to give you the passport. European countries, no European countries that are affordable here, they're more likely to give you a passport. So, hey, do I pay a little bit more to live in a place? Whether it's in taxes or cost of living, but 3, 5, 7 years down the line, I've got a second citizenship, and if I didn't get that second citizenship by naturalization, I would have to go to a Caribbean citizenship by investment and donate $200,000, for example, and maybe the passport I'm getting is better. So these are all the factors that you want to consider when affordability comes into play, especially if you are a high earner or a high net worth individual. And even if you're not ready to move yet, these places could be a plan B. You can get a residence permit in Mexico or the Philippines and just kind of keep it in your back pocket. And if one day you're ready for affordability, for lower taxes, maybe for more safety, for whatever you're looking for, you can always execute that. So it's a good idea to have some of these places already in your life before you need them.
Awesome, guys. Well, yeah, I mean, he talks a little bit in this video about like guys who are doing like pretty well for themselves already. Also, there's people who maybe are like, you could say, like lower earners in the U.S., but they have like a remote job, right? So figure out like what's a good place for you to go, because most of these places are going to be a good fit for you anyways. Like stretching the U.S. dollar or U.K. pound, Canadian, right? Like some of these places, and also everything on the list are like they're beautiful countries, good food. You'll be able to stretch the dollar pretty well, and all you really need to consider is, can you make it work? Potentially with like your work hours, because sometimes it's like a time zone thing. Do you want to work graveyard shift? Are you open to that? Or is your work flexible with the time hours, right? Because that could be a really solid move for you, so you can kind of escape some of the craziness going on in some of the other countries and the higher cost of living. Because again, like one big reason a lot of people do this stuff is to start saving. So again, like there's a lot of stuff going on in this video, and you might start out renting, because he's talking about like buying out places, but that might not be in your near future. So still like a cool video. I like that he kind of glossed over each one of those, and I was able to kind of talk to you a little bit more rather than just like the tax benefits, this and that. And one last thing worth mentioning, because I noticed he talked about this, it's entirely, different depending on the person. I've heard digital nomads or remote workers, whatever, right, say that they like being able to bounce around, right? Like let's say like getting the best tax benefits from being in this country for 3 months, another one for 3 months, another one for 3 months, right? And that could be good. Or I've heard some people doing that where they say that they are not the biggest fan of, like, they feel like they can't focus as much because they're bouncing around so much, right? Like they want to be able to like kind of like lock in and focus somewhere. So just keep some of this stuff in mind when you're going over. But again, if this is something you're interested in, obviously you've watched this whole video, so I recommend doing a bit of your own research, watching a bit more, and seeing what seems like a good fit for you. So anyways, guys, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. You got this, bro.